Daughter scared of school's punishment. Mother comes and sees this. Here we have a story of a young school-age girl who supposedly misbehaved in school. As teachers do, they set about to punish young Allegra for misbehaving. What would at first seem like an ordinary detention as punishment would quickly turn into the things nightmares are made of. You'll never believe what happened to this poor girl. In the heart of a quaint, bustling neighborhood lived 8-year-old Allegra, a beacon of youthful curiosity and intelligence. Her world was one of vibrant imagination where dolls came to life and tea parties were grand affairs with the finest china scents conjured from her playroom. Allegra, with her bright eyes and a cascade of curly hair, was not just the heart of her home but also a star at school. She was a child who found joy in the corridors of learning, her report cards a testament to her brilliance, a string of straight A's adorning the refrigerator door. Allegra's demeanor at home and in class was exemplary. She was the child who listened attentively, her hand was always first to shoot up with answers or thoughtful questions. Her behavior was a source of pride for her mother, Claudia. One sunny afternoon in the coziness of their living room, Allegra sat cross-legged on the floor, her dolls arranged before her in an elaborate setup for a tea party. Claudia watched her daughter from the sofa, a smile playing on her lips. "Allegra, I'm so proud of how well you're doing in school," Claudia began, her voice warm with affection. "Thank you, Mommy. I like school. Math is fun and I love reading stories." "You're such a bright girl," Claudia nodded. "And you always behave so well. Mrs. Thompson tells me you're a joy in class." Allegra beamed, picking up a doll and adjusting its dress. "I try to be good. I like helping Mrs. Thompson and the other kids." "That's wonderful, honey. But remember, it's okay to make mistakes sometimes. That's how we learn." "I know, Mommy. I just like when everything goes right." "Speaking of new things, you're starting at a new school on Monday. How do you feel about that?" "I'm a little scared, Mommy. What if the other kids don't like me? What if I get lost?" Claudia moved to sit beside her daughter, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It's normal to feel scared about going to a new place, but I know you're gonna do great. You're smart, kind, and so much fun to be around. The other kids are going to love you." "But what if they don't?" Allegra's voice was small, her usual confidence dimmed by the uncertainty of the unknown. "You know, when I was your age, I moved to a new school too. I was really nervous just like you, but I met some of my best friends there," Claudia shared, hoping to ease her daughter's fears. "Really?" "Yes, really. And remember, it's okay to be a little scared. It means you're about to do something really brave." Allegra leaned into her mother, seeking comfort in her presence. "What if I don't understand something in class?" "Then you ask for help just like you do now. Your new teachers will be there to help you, just like Mrs. Thompson." Allegra nodded, a flicker of her usual spark returning. "What was your favorite subject in school, Mommy?" "I loved art. I could paint and draw for hours." "What about you? What are you most excited to learn about in your new school?" "I think science. I want to learn about planets and stars." Allegra's voice was tinged with excitement, her fears momentarily forgotten in the wonder of learning. "That sounds amazing. You'll have to teach me all about them," Claudia said, her heart lightened by her daughter's renewed enthusiasm. Allegra smiled, a sense of resolve taking shape. "I will, Mommy, and maybe I'll make a new friend who likes stars too." "I'm sure you will, and no matter what happens, I'm always here for you," Claudia reassured her, hugging her tightly. As they sat together, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow around them, a sense of calm settled over Allegra. With her mother's support, she felt ready to face the new challenges ahead. The prospect of a new school, once daunting, now seemed like an exciting adventure, a chance to learn, grow, and perhaps find a friend who shared her fascination with the stars. Allegra's first day at her new school was a far cry from what she'd anticipated. The school building itself seemed to be in a state of neglect, with its crumbling walls and broken chairs. The books in the classroom were worn, their pages torn or missing. The teachers who she'd hoped would be a source of inspiration and guidance seemed weary and disheartened. As she sat through her classes, Allegra couldn't help but notice the disinterest in her math teacher's eyes. It was as if the joy of teaching had long been extinguished. Then there was her gym teacher, whose physical appearance seemed at odds with the subject he was supposed to be teaching. Allegra found it hard to reconcile his role with his apparent lack of fitness. But it was Mr. Kilgore, the principal, who truly unnerved her. He was a short, rotund man with a shiny bald head and a perpetual scowl that seemed etched into his features. He looked at the children as though they were a nuisance rather than a responsibility. Allegra couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear every time his stern gaze swept over the students. Lunchtime offered no respite. Eager to make friends, Allegra made her way to the playground with a hopeful heart. But her hopes were quickly dashed when she encountered Peter. He was a towering figure compared to her, with a mean streak that became apparent almost immediately. "Hey, you new girl!" Peter's voice boomed across the playground as he approached Allegra. "Give me your lunch money or you'll regret it." Allegra's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "No, I won't give you my lunch money, that's wrong," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady. Peter's face twisted into a sneer. "Wrong, huh? Let's see if you feel the same after this." He raised his hand to hit her, but Allegra, fueled by fear and a surprising burst of courage, reacted quickly. She struck Peter in the stomach with all her might, her small frame belying the strength of her punch. Peter's eyes widened in shock and he crumpled to the ground, gasping for air. Allegra stood there, her chest heaving, shocked by her own actions. She'd never been in a fight before, and the realization of what she'd done began to sink in. She looked around, expecting to see a teacher or someone who would intervene, but there was no one in sight. The playground was a lawless land, it seemed. As Principal Kilgore approached the scene, his face contorted in anger. Allegra braced herself for the confrontation. "Allegra, what do you think you're doing?" Mr. Kilgore bellowed, his eyes fixed on her with a harsh glare. "This kind of violence is unacceptable at my school." "Mr. Kilgore, please, I was just defending myself. Peter was bullying me. He threatened to hurt me if I didn't give him my lunch money." "Defending yourself by resorting to violence?" Mr. Kilgore scoffed. "That's no excuse. You're a violent young girl, and such behavior has no place in this school." "But I didn't start it. He hit me first. I had to protect myself," Allegra insisted, desperately trying to make him understand. "Enough. I won't tolerate such excuses. You're new here, but you'll quickly learn that I run a tight ship. Violence is strict punishment." "Please, Mr. Kilgore, I'm not a violent person. I was scared and had no choice." Allegra's eyes were wide with fear, her words rushing out in plea for understanding. "Your actions speak louder than words, Allegra. As a principal, it's my duty to maintain order and discipline. You've shown that you can't be trusted to behave appropriately," Mr. Kilgore stated coldly. "But it's not fair. I was just trying to stand up for myself." Allegra's voice cracked under the strain of injustice. "Fair or not, you've made your bed and now you must lie in it. I'll ensure you're appropriately punished for your actions. Consider this a lesson you won't soon forget. In my school, we don't tolerate any form of violence, no matter the reason," Mr. Kilgore declared, his tone final. Allegra stood there feeling helpless and misunderstood. Her attempt at defending herself had turned into a nightmare. She realized that in Mr. Kilgore's eyes, her innocence didn't matter. She was just another problem to be dealt with harshly, a means for him to assert his authority. The unfairness of it all weighed heavily on her, a crushing burden for such young shoulders. Allegra's heart sank as Mr. Kilgore pronounced her punishment. "You'll stay for detention after school." "But Mr. Kilgore, I didn't start the fight. I was defending myself." "Enough," Mr. Kilgore snapped. "Your excuses don't work here. Detention is final." Allegra's pleas fell on deaf ears. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of her school day, a sense of dread filled her. She'd never been in trouble like this before, and the fear of the unknown was overwhelming. As she exited her last class, she saw Mr. Kilgore already waiting for her, his expression stern and unyielding. He grabbed her arm with a grip so tight it hurt, and Allegra winced. "You're hurting me," she said, trying to wriggle free, but Mr. Kilgore's grip only tightened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said coldly, leading her down the hallway. They reached a door at the end of the corridor, away from the prying eyes of other students and teachers. Mr. Kilgore unlocked it, revealing a small cramped room no bigger than a closet. The space was barely enough to turn around and just tall enough for Allegra to stand up straight. "This is cruel, you can't do this," Allegra cried. "This is what happens to troublemakers," Mr. Kilgore said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. With a forceful shove, he pushed her into the room and locked the door behind her. Allegra's heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was trapped. The walls seemed to close on her, the lack of space suffocating. She banged on the door, her voice hoarse as she screamed for help, but it was no use. The hallway was deserted and her cries echoed unanswered. The room was dark save for a sliver of light that crept in from under the door. Allegra sank to the floor, her body shaking with sobs. She felt abandoned, punished for something she hadn't done, and the injustice of it all was overwhelming. As minutes turned to hours, the small room felt more like a prison. Allegra's thoughts raced, filled with fear and confusion. Why was Mr. Kilgore so cruel? Why didn't he believe her? She replayed the events of the day over and over in her mind, each time feeling the sting of injustice more acutely. The tiny room where Allegra was confined felt like a furnace. As the hours dragged on, the heat intensified, making it difficult for her to breathe. She felt lightheaded, her throat parched from crying and stifling heat. She had never felt so alone and scared. Meanwhile, Claudia's worry turned to panic when Allegra didn't return home from school. She was about to call the school when her phone rang. It was Principal Kilgore, his voice harsh and unfriendly. "Mrs. Johnson, come pick up your child. She's been in detention." Claudia was taken aback. "Detention? My Allegra, there must be some mistake," she stammered, confusion and worry knotting her stomach. "No mistake. She's been a problem today. Come now," Kilgore said curtly before hanging up. Rushing to the school, Claudia's mind raced with questions. Allegra, her sweet, well-behaved daughter in detention? It didn't make sense. As she arrived, she saw Mr. Kilgore waiting, his expression one of annoyance rather than concern. "Where's my daughter? What has she done to deserve detention?" Claudia demanded, her voice trembling with anger and worry. Mr. Kilgore led her down the hallway to the small room at the end. He opened the door, revealing Allegra, who looked weak, her face tear-streaked and flushed from the heat. "Allegra!" Claudia gasped, rushing to her daughter. She enveloped Allegra in her arms, feeling her small body tremble. "What kind of punishment is this?" Claudia turned to Mr. Kilgore, her voice rising in fury. "Locking a child in a closet? This is inhumane!" "Your daughter was involved in a physical altercation," Kilgore said, unmoved by Claudia's anger. "This is how we deal with such behavior." Allegra, gathering her strength, spoke up. "Mommy, I didn't start the fight. A boy was bullying me and I only defended myself." Claudia listened in horror as Allegra recounted the events. The bullying, the fight, and the unjust detention in the sweltering room. With each word, Claudia's anger grew. "You locked my daughter in a closet for defending herself? She is a child!" Claudia was livid, her voice echoing down the empty hallway. "Mrs. Johnson, your daughter needs to learn," Mr. Kilgore started, but Claudia cut him off. "Learn what? That she should allow herself to be bullied? That standing up for herself leads to cruel and unusual punishment?" Claudia's eyes were ablaze with fury. "This is not discipline, this is mistreatment." Mr. Kilgore's face reddened. "I run a disciplined school. This is how we maintain order." "By torturing children?" Claudia shot back. "You've misused your position of power." Allegra clung to her mother, her body still recovering from the ordeal. Claudia turned her attention back to Kilgore. "I will not let this go, Mr. Kilgore. I'm going to report this to the school board, authorities, and anyone else who will listen. You will be held accountable for your actions." "Do what you must. I stand by my methods." Claudia took Allegra's hand, leading her out of the school. "Come on, honey, let's get you home." As they walked, Allegra leaned on her mother, drained from the experience. Claudia's mind raced with the steps she needed to take. She would fight for her daughter, ensure that Mr. Kilgore faced consequences, and that no other child would suffer in his tyrannical rule. That night, after tending to Allegra, ensuring she was hydrated and comfortable, Claudia sat down at her computer. She began to write a detailed complaint to the school board, documenting every aspect of Allegra's ordeal. She described the bullying, the fight, and the inhumane punishment Allegra had endured. Her letter was clear and concise, a call to action against the injustices carried out in the name of discipline. She detailed her plan to press criminal charges and her intent to seek legal counsel. Claudia knew this was just the beginning of a long battle, but she was determined to see it through for Allegra's sake and for the sake of all children who had suffered under Mr. Kilgore's regime. As she hit send, Claudia felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to fight. No child should ever experience what Allegra had, and Claudia would do everything in her power to ensure that justice was served. However, it didn't end there because Claudia was determined, and she would also get the media and the police involved. As Claudia sat before the local news camera, her heart pounded with a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. She cleared her throat, looking directly into the lens, ready to share Allegra's story with the world. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. What happened to my daughter Allegra at her school under the care of Principal Kilgore is something no child should ever come to experience. It is a parent's worst nightmare come to life." She paused for a moment, collecting her thoughts. "Allegra is a bright, kind-hearted girl. She's always been a joy at home and school, so when I received a call to pick her up from detention, I was shocked. Allegra had never been in trouble before." Claudia's expression hardened as she recounted the day's events. "When I arrived, what I saw was horrifying. My daughter was locked in a tiny sweltering closet barely big enough to stand in. She was dehydrated, frightened, and in distress. Mr. Kilgore justified this as punishment for defending herself against a bully." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes conveying the depth of her emotion. "This wasn't discipline, it was cruelty. My daughter was punished for standing up to a bully while the bully received no repercussions. It is unjust and inhumane. I took immediate action. I contacted the police, school board, and now I'm here sharing our story. No child should fear going to school, and no parent should worry about their child's safety at the hands of those entrusted to protect them." The interview concluded with Claudia's final powerful statement. "Thankfully, justice has been served. Mr. Kilgore has been fired and sentenced to 5 years in prison for child mistreatment. But this experience has left deep scars on Allegra that she will never forget. As her mother, I will do everything in my power to help her heal and ensure this never happens to another child." As the camera turned off, Claudia let out a deep breath. She felt a sense of relief mixed with ongoing concern. Allegra was slowly recovering, her resilience shining through, but the trauma of that day lingered. In the weeks that followed, Claudia became an advocate for safer school environments and stricter oversight of disciplinary methods in schools. She spoke at parent-teacher meetings and joined local education boards, determined to make a positive change. Allegra, with her mother's unwavering support, gradually regained her cheerful spirit. She returned to school, this time to a more nurturing and understanding environment. Yet the memories of her ordeal remain, a somber reminder of what they had both endured. If you enjoy hearing about unbelievable yet true events such as these, then subscribe and keep coming back for more harrowing stories.